Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the channel. Once again, I'm joined by Elizabeth. Thank you back for part two, Elizabeth. And today we were talking about divination and tarot in part one. So right now we're going to talk about divination and the runes in general in part two, and we hope that you will enjoy this. So, Elizabeth, you were talking about some of your favorite runes when we dropped off last episode.
Yeah, so I was talking about incorporating the runes with some of my spell work, sometimes carving them on candles, sometimes just chanting them or evoking them in my thoughts during meditations. But Hunter and I were just joking about how everyone, kind of always has favorites. So I think it's hard not to. Um, I like to tie them to stories, particularly, or memories. Sometimes visceral, like smells, or uruz, for example, is a rune of physical strength and activity and vitality. I remember at the beginning of this outbreak, I fell ill, and I'm still not sure if I had it, corona or not. I recovered, thankfully. But something I did when I was ill was I did a spell that utilized urus and algiz, so the rune of physical health and vitality and protection, which is also it's one of my favorites. I've noticed you've had it on your forehead.
The alges, it's the most mysterious rune because when I look at the different descriptions of it, it seems like a lot of people. It's hard to find out exactly the nature of this rune. Like generally, it does mean defense, but the ideographic connections, especially as far as Edred Thorson and a couple other people that I've read, it's hard to figure out what alges is beyond that because usually you have more information on the runes, but this is the most mysterious rune to me. But that's why it's one of the runes I've tried to get to know most, and that force. And it almost takes a lot of working with it before you even get how it feels. And it does feel like a very defense oriented rune for sure. It's almost greatly paired with Iwaz. They work very well together because we're both talking. It's Algiz is Yggdrasil, basically, as well as protection from Yggdrasil is how I usually understand it. And Iwaz is the connection between the different nine worlds, which I think of as nine different dimensions with many different universes in these dimensions. There's a connection of that, and then you have this movement where part of it goes down and part of it goes up for Iwaz, and it kind of locks the forces along Yggdrasil in place so that you can understand them. So I think that these two runes go very well together. But you can of course continue with your favorites and maybe even a little bit of Algis.
Well, it's interesting you mentioned that because I was saying to a friend, this isn't something I've sat down and like written essays on or anything like that. It was more of a passing thought that I've sort of worked upon in increments. But I feel like there are some runes that I refer to as shamanic runes. I mean, they're all shamanic in their own way. They all have different tonalities that work with the spirit and the material and sort of help join those and, like you said, weave the fabric of reality. But I feel like Algiz and even Awaz too. I see, and on Sue's definitely. Though on Sue's is a little aside from that because it's more the person performing it is Odin's rune, and Odin has very many shamanic aspects. But particularly, I feel like the main players for that is what you just described.
Yeah, because
Probably.
we got Iwaz that kind of locks the understanding. We have Algiz protection from the universe, and then we have Awaz, Odin's horse that rides throughout Yggdrasil. Which when we think of Odin, we think of a path that we ourselves can follow. Odin walks it not to be above us, but to show us how to walk it. So when these three runes are very important. I completely agree with you.
Well, it's interesting. I like to think of, yeah, like Algiz is the tree. Iwaz is the roots going up and down the tree. It's more of a rune I associate with traversing between worlds. Sorry, and I associate more with like working with the dead, necromancy, spirit work of the lower world aspect. On Sue's, Odin hangs upon the tree, and then Awaz. Interestingly enough, my understanding of it is having sort of like spiritual communal help, but less in a materialistic way, and more like being receptive to divine help and divine possession almost. It was very much compared to when people channel the gods or channel spirits, they're almost being ridden by these spirits, or they're very receptive. They're ridden like a horse, and they're another
Hmm.
quote from Diana Paxton's book is the drum is the horse of the shaman. And I think that's very interesting in how we utilize these spiritual vehicles and that are very much animated and very, very sentient, and how we
Mm-hmm.
become them and are receptive. So it's almost like I feel like Algiz is the defensive, like more proactive rune in that aspect, like the
Mm-hmm.
positive and negative aspects of the battery, you know, and then Awaz is being more receptive to things and welcoming spirit interference or welcoming spiritual co collaboration.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah, definitely. I haven't thought of it was in that way, but that definitely is interesting, and I can see completely what you mean. I guess since you showed yours, I'll go ahead and show. Now these I made. Let's see if I can do this with. All right. So these are made from a tree in my yard. What I did was I cut down the branch, I let it dry out, and then I cut it into these segments. And after I did that, I carved each rune into the wood segments,
Mm-hmm.
and then I also burned it along the same lines as I carved it. And then after I did that, I put a little bit of my blood on all of these runes, and then I painted them red. Now, the significance of red in magic in general is, of course, you have your passion. It's a power color, things like that. And a lot of runes, as far as my research goes, were painted red, and they were to make it more powerful. It was to make that set of runes more of an energy connected to yourself and your emotions as a human being, and the blood directly ties them to an individual. So these will always be my runes, and honestly, I don't like other people touching them. So like whenever I do a rune reading for somebody, they can I do it for them, but because I don't want to get anybody else's energy on these runes. They're very much attuned to myself. But you don't necessarily have to make your own for sure. I found that they're very potent when you do, but the main point is to work with runes very often, to use them, to touch them a lot. That way you get your kind of personal vibration, your energy onto the runes. So do you feel like you're spiritually connected to your particular set? And if so, is it because it's bone? Is it because you use it very often, or is it because you meditate on each rune? How do you connect to your rune set?
Well, it's interesting. I feel very connected to my rune set. I think that they're very particular spirits. Like I said, I was originally very frustrated with the runes, and that's how I almost feel like they're family in a way, because it's like, I'm so frustrated. I'm frustrated with you only in a way I could be if I was more, intimately acquainted
Yeah.
and related to them. But I remember actually specifically, I was sitting down with a friend of mine while I was learning more about them and working with my first rune set, who was performing a geomantic divination for me, which is a whole other kettle of fish, very, very weird system, has to do with planetary figures. But I was joking because he was sort of offering, he mentioned that he was teaching a class on it, and I was like, yeah, maybe I'll learn that. I'm working with the runes, but I'm kind of frustrated with them, and I made the joke about, them all meaning the same thing or something like that.
Hmm.
And then that rune set disappeared, funnily enough, as if they heard me. So fast forward, I got another rune set because I suddenly realized the error of my ways and how much I liked working with them, and bought a new set. And then I found my other set after I had done some work with the new set. So I gifted them to a friend of mine, a sort of spiritual godfather figure who I talked a lot about various spiritual systems, and he had expressed an interest in runes but hadn't worked with them. So I said, here you go, Ed, have these, and he was very touched.
Hmm.
But
That's awesome.
I recently went through a sort of crisis logistically with my housing situation in February, and I remember being like really upset and overwhelmed because it was just as I had completed reading and researching Diana Paxton's book and doing all the rituals for it. It's called Taking Up the Runes. Very wonderful resource. And I'd done so much magic in that space, and I really didn't want to leave it, and I was really upset and freaking out. And I had this vision where I saw myself as if I was hanging upon the tree of Yggdrasil, as if I
Mm.
was, and looking down and appraising the runes beneath me, woven into the roots and the pools of water beneath. And the kind of overall message I got from that vision was like, no, we're going to take you where you need to go. We'll guide you. Just continue to work with us. And
So
what
I just want
what
to ask about this vision. So was this something that hit you at a particular time? Like what were you doing, or was that kind of irrelevant and just hit you all at once, or
It just
how
hit me all at once, but I was definitely like alone in my room that I had to leave suddenly because the electricity blew out in this house, and I was cat sitting for the owner of it, and I was like, not thrilled about it. It was the midwinter, it's kind of cold over here, we had no heat. I was rather distressed, and I was in my room just kind of appraising my altar and my bed and everything, and like kind of like give me a break. And that's when I had that's typically how these things come to me, is in times of outward introspection where I'm kind of like grasping at my reality around me, but also like trying to find a way to evoke or mirror what I'm trying to spiritually induce or wherever I am spiritually or psychologically.
that makes a lot of sense. So I think that I'll mention the sources that I got after this next part. So, like, when you typically do a rune reading, so a lot of mine, I can do ones for different various lives, past lives. Like, I can do a whole, cross set, past lives, later lives, this life, and then different influences, on the sides. But of that particular life. But usually what I use is the 3 rune set. Like, I get really accurate information just from the 3 rune set. So read right to left, which is, you have the overview, then you have the challenge, then you have the action. And as I've done more and more readings and work with the runes, I found that even though that a lot of people would think it's vague, just because their placement with the other runes, I can figure out something very specific to tell a person or to know myself, because of not necessarily just what the runes represent, though these are primordial spirits, but their relationship to each other. So you can view reality because of the relationship to the different runes that you draw for any set. But for any set, the easiest is probably the 3 rune set, which I use quite a bit. So when you're laying out the runes, do you just draw one at once, or do you have 3, or do you have a different layout? How do you usually set up a rune reading for either for yourself or somebody else?
So I'm not quite so ambitious as to read into other lives right at this moment, unless it's specifically I feel intuitively that it's mentioned or elaborated in a reading.
Mm-hmm.
But I do use 3 runes typically. Occasionally I'll set out a cross set, like as if I'm reading a rudimentary, very rudimentary Celtic cross without a crossing influence, just the head, the center, past, present, future. I do read left to right, but I think that I have baby steps. I'm still learning the runes, and I really just started working with them truly maybe a year ago or so, about a year ago.
Oh, it's fine. I mean, a lot of people do it from left to right.
But I have found that I've gotten a lot of really astoundingly good information. One reading I did a couple weeks or maybe a month ago or so was for a friend. It was just spur of the moment. She happened to be in the cafe that I was sitting in, and I saw her, and she came in. I was talking with another friend of ours about divination, and I said to her, I was like, "Oh, do you want me to give you a reading? I have my runes with me, and I want to practice." And she was like, "Absolutely." So I can't remember what the first 2 runes were, but the final rune was a backwards Berkano. And I'm still sort of feeling out this rune. I feel attracted to it. I like the energy of it, but I don't know. I still need to do more meditation and work and research on it. But I typically associate it with similar to the Empress and tarot. It's like a more um, outward, external, blossoming femininity, very spring energy. And I said to her, I was like, "Well, are you readdressing your femininity and like your relationship to your cycles and everything?" She's like, "Yeah, I'm turning 35 this year, and I've really, thought of myself as always someone who wanted to have a child or a family, but that's like the year that your fertility starts going, away a little, they consider it to be less advantageous at that time." So she's sort of readdressing her goals and her feelings about that particular projection of her identity she kind of always assumed would be a part of her. And so I thought it was really interesting, and I felt very gratified to have that affirmation reading. And something I used to not really pay attention to reversals. It's something I mentioned to you, but someone said to me that reversals, the goal of once you receive a reversal, the goal is to just upright it. So when I receive a reversal in a reading, with runes or with tarot, it's typically someone just revising their views on that aspect of their lives. Or it could be the opposite of that energy being evoked in the situation, depending upon what the reading's about or how I'm reading it, how the person's taking it. It's a lot of things.
So, yeah, that definitely makes a lot of sense. See, for a long time, I still don't always count the reversals, but if it's a particular kind of reversal where I think it's significant, I will count it as part of the reading. So when it comes to Berkana, we have two different. It is the healing and the earth and the femininity rune. The two, it's basically a B, but a pointy B, and usually represents both breasts and mountains. That's kind of its ideographic association. But that, just like that represents femininity, we have Ingus, which is is basically the rune of Frere, or Ing, as some people know him. And just like there is a lot of femininity with Berkana, with Ingus, we have a lot of masculinity. So these two are kind of usually paired together, and they're both Vanir gods, Vanir associations and symbols. But they're, of course, like I said before, they are very primal forces that are primal spirits that have to overlap to help create the fabric of reality. So, moving on here, do you have any books that you'd recommend before I start recommending some of the books that I got right here, as far as some books that have taught you as an individual?
Yeah, Dinah Paxson's books, Taking Up the Runes, very helpful. I like that it interweaves modern interpretations with ancient, what they assume people use the different runes for, interweaves a lot of references to Viking and Norse and Icelandic ancient poetry, which I found lovely. Even Anglo-Saxon poetry, though it always references the elder Futhark. I also like her book Odin, which is more of a lighter read, but is more of a primer on that specific god's various personas and sides. I'm actually really intrigued. I think at some point I do want to check out. What is the book that you're always recommending it, but I can never remember the author. It's called Futhar.
Well, the Handbook of Rune Magic is by Edred Thorson, which actually isn't his real name, but it's actually his pen name. But he's got a PhD. He's been doing runes his whole life. So this is what it looks like. Edred Thorson, A Handbook of Rune Magic. It's called Futhark. And then this is by him, but he's using his actual name. So he shifts to his actual name. This is Icelandic Magic, and his name is Stephen E. Flowers, PhD, Practical Secrets of the Northern Grimoires. So that's what that looks like. Very good sources. I got a few more recommendations, unless you wanted to finish your thought.
Those are the books I've been pursuing so far, besides Raven Caldera's works on the more shamanic aspects of Northern magic.
For sure.
But as I'm still new to this, I'm definitely open for suggestions. So
yeah. So Raven Caldera, he has this book called Weird Walkers, and he talks about the runes in a very shamanic way. He's the one that made me realize that runes are these primordial spirits that are the god. Well, he didn't say the gods of the gods. That was a different source that I can't remember. But he made me realize that, and then I learned from other books that the runes weren't originally used for divination. You can use them for divination, but originally they were spirits. So, like, originally they started out as spirits to be respected, but then we started using them for divination. So as long as you respect them as spirits, or respect them that they do have power, and that they are in essence conscious beings, you can use them for divination. But I mean, you can use them for divination regardless, but they're most effective if you acknowledge them for who they are, what they are. So what I have here, this book, Nordic Runes by Paul Rise Mountfort, has a great rune poem, well, 3 rune poems per rune in here. Really good for getting to know the runes and like their different influences culturally. Rune Lore, I haven't actually read this, but this is another book by Edred Thorson that's highly recommended by runic societies to read. So this is one of the primers you have to read in order to actually enroll for a runic degree, a magical degree. It's not a college. It's kind of like what do you call it? Huh?
A certification program of sorts?
Yeah, it's like a something like that is like this foundation where they're very focused on the runes. They're very focused on the history. They want you to prove that you can do rune magic and that you come up with a specific use for the runes. It actually takes a while to earn this degree, but you become a part of their lodge, after you prove yourself, you get your degree, whatever. All right, so Living Runes: Theory and Practice of North Divination by Galina Kraskova. This one is not bad. I have not read the entire one of this. And then I think I already shared the other two. So all those are books that I'd highly recommend for the runes. Also, just in general, I'd recommend the author Morgan Daimler. She has a really good primer on Odin, Morgan Daimler, and she just came out with a primer on Thor. These are both, the Odin one's very useful. I don't agree with everything in it. It's not deep enough in some parts, but still good. And the Thor one I haven't actually dug into yet, but these are really good books to kind of start your path off. So in conclusion, do you desire to keep on getting closer to the runes and perhaps making them a serious part of your spiritual life, or do you feel like you're more focused on other areas?
No, I think I very much feel very compelled to work with them and continue working with them and have an evolving relationship with them as I do with the tarot. I think, like I said before we started recording, viewing the runes versus looking at the tarot imagery is similar to regarding a Renaissance painting versus an abstract painting.
Mm-hmm.
They're no less astounding or intriguing or nourishing psychologically, but I think that they're just different styles. I think that I feel very, very, very affirmed working with the runes and my continue working with runes, both by the deities and the gods of the pantheon and by my ancestors, very much so. And I hope to have a continued journey with them. And that's very much the energy I get from them. I think they're a little more active in some ways than the spirit of the tarot. I feel like tarot can be very rigid sometimes. People can be very dogmatic about systems of the tarot, or they can be very loosey-goosey and like, oh, it's whatever you feel. I'm like, I'm kind of somewhere in the middle path of like
Mm-hmm.
the framework for meeting. And just like the runes are, I feel like very much the runes, because I think maybe they're possibly a little more niche. I haven't encountered them much in outside of the circles that I'm in, and people are more familiar with the concept of the tarot. But I feel like the runes feel very very much like they want to be used, they want to be known by all sorts of people, regardless of your lineage. I think the runes are wonderful, wonderful symbol lexicon and very active and very magically potent, both for divination and spell work.
I can definitely second all of that, and I'm always evolving myself in my understanding of the roots and my connection to them. You never really stop learning, never really stop growing. But yeah, I totally second all that information. Thank you very much for joining me for this video. We'll keep on talking after I stop the video. But hey, you want to plug in your Instagram account?
Yeah, so my Instagram account is one word. It's mock ingenue. Can read like mocking ingenue, but really it's mock ingenue. MOCKINGENUE. And that's where I mostly host my divination services or collective readings.
Excellent. Thank you very much for joining me. I hope everybody out there enjoys this. If any of you have any questions, comments, concerns, feel free to contact me at www.facebook.com/hunter.salazar. And you can message me, you can friend me, what have you. I will hopefully be working more with Elizabeth in the future on future videos. And thank you all for watching, and all of you have a great day.